The apartment smelled like rain and old paper, which Ren had decided, in the 4 days he had lived there, was either charming or unbearable. He had not yet settled the question. He sat on the edge of the narrow bed in the spare room, his room technically, though it still felt borrowed, and listened to the sounds of the man in the kitchen. A drawer opened. Something ceramic clicked against the counter. The tap ran for exactly 3 seconds and then stopped. He had already learned the rhythms of Seo Jiwoo's mornings the way one learns a language one never asked to study, involuntarily, with an accuracy that felt almost intrusive. Ren pressed his thumb into the corner of the worn paperback in his lap and stared at the wall. He was 23 years old and had nowhere else to go. He tried not to think about this too directly, the way one tries not to look at a bright light, sideways, carefully, briefly. His older sister had arranged it. "Jiwoo Oppa has a spare room and he owes me a favor," she had said on the phone, in the flat, efficient tone she used when she had already made a decision and was merely informing him of it. "You'll stay there until you figure out the next thing. Don't make it weird." Ren had not asked what the favor was. He had just packed a bag. The thing about Seo Jiwoo was that he was quiet in a way that had weight to it. Not cold. Ren had met cold people, and Jiwoo was not that. He was simply contained. He moved through his apartment like a man who had arranged every object with intention and trusted that arrangement to hold. He said good morning when they passed in the hall. He left a key on the counter the first night without ceremony or explanation. He knocked before entering the kitchen if Ren was already in it, which was a courtesy Ren had not expected and did not quite know how to respond to. He was 28. He worked from home, something with architecture, Ren's sister had said vaguely. He had long, careful hands and a habit of pushing his glasses up his nose when he was reading, which he did often, and a stillness about him that Ren found simultaneously calming and, in some way he refused to examine, slightly maddening. A knock at his door. 2 even taps. "Breakfast," said the voice on the other side. Nothing more. Ren set down his book and went. They ate at a small wooden table by the window, facing the grey morning street. Jiwoo had made rice porridge and soft-boiled eggs and sliced cucumber arranged with a neatness that made Ren feel obscurely ashamed of the chaos of his own side of the bathroom counter. They did not speak for a few minutes. It was not uncomfortable, or it was, but not in the way Ren had expected. He had anticipated the brittle silence of 2 strangers performing politeness. Instead it felt like something more neutral, like sharing a train compartment. "You don't have to eat here," Jiwoo said eventually. He was looking at his bowl, not at Ren. "If you'd rather take it to your room, that's fine." "No, I like this," Ren said, and was surprised to find he meant it. Jiwoo looked up briefly. His eyes, behind the glasses, were dark and level. "All right." Another pause. Ren moved cucumber around his bowl. "You can have friends over," Jiwoo said. "Within reason. I work in the evenings sometimes, and I need it quiet after 9, but during the day you're free." "I don't really have." Ren stopped. "Okay. Thank you." He felt Jiwoo's gaze on the side of his face for a moment, assessing and then releasing, and then Jiwoo was looking at the window again. "Your sister said you'd be here a month, maybe 2. "Yeah." "That's fine." It should have been reassuring, that there was a timeline, a known end point. Ren had always liked knowing when things would be over. He had a tendency to exhaust his welcome in places, and it was better to know the door in advance, to plan his exit before anyone had to ask him to use it. But something about the words sat wrong in him. That's fine. The easy, unbothered quality of it. He was going to leave in 2 months. This man would set another place at the table for no one, and the chair would go back against the wall, and the spare room would empty out, and nothing would have happened here at all. Rin ate his porridge and watched the street and thought, 2 months. He had survived longer on less. 3 weeks in, Ren knew more about Seo Jiwoo than he had meant to. He knew that Jiwoo made his coffee too strong and drank it standing up, leaning against the counter with one hand braced on the edge, looking at nothing. He knew that Jiwoo kept a small plant on the windowsill of his study and watered it every Thursday morning with the quiet solemnity of someone honoring a private ritual. He knew that Jiwoo listened to classical music when he was working, not anything dramatic or sweeping, but the kind that moved like water in a glass, unhurried and contained, and that when a problem in his work was difficult, he would go completely silent, even his breathing seemed to pause, and then after several minutes he would exhale and start drawing again. He knew these things because the apartment was not very large, and because Ren was not very good at not noticing things about people he lived with. He had always been like this, too attentive, his mother had said when he was small, too much in other people's pockets. He didn't know how to be in a space with someone without accumulating them. He also knew that Jiwoo noticed him back, though the noticing was different in kind. Where Ren catalogued and absorbed, Jiwoo simply adjusted. He started making 2 cups of coffee in the morning without being asked. He moved the extra blanket from the top shelf to the lower one after Ran had, just once, climbed up for it in the dark and knocked half the shelf's contents onto the floor. He began, gradually, to leave his study door open in the evenings. That last one was the thing that Ren turned over most often, late at night when he couldn't sleep. The open door. It wasn't an invitation. Jiwoo never called out to him, never looked up from his work in a way that suggested he was waiting for company. But it was a space left unfilled, and Ren, who had always been drawn toward unfilled spaces, found himself standing in the doorway sometimes, leaning against the frame, not quite entering. "You can come in," Jiwoo said one evening, without looking up. "If you want." Ren came in. He sat on the low chair in the corner that was not quite a reading chair, and was probably there for storage, and read his book in companionable silence for an hour, and then Jiwoo made tea and they sat and talked, briefly and easily, about nothing consequential. Architecture. A book Ran had left on the kitchen table that Jiwoo had apparently started. The way the light came through the study window in the late afternoon and hit the wall at an angle that made the whole room feel like it was leaning toward something. It was the longest conversation they had had. When Ren went to bed that night, he lay in the dark for a long time thinking about it, thinking about how easy it had been, how unlike himself he had not been, how much he had simply been himself, and how Jiwoo had not seemed to find that inconvenient. He counted the remaining weeks on his fingers in the dark. 5. It started, as most things with Ren started, because he was trying too hard. Jiwoo had a deadline coming up, some submission for a project that had been running long, something to do with a community library in a small city Ren couldn't picture. He had been in his study until past midnight for 3 nights running, and had started forgetting to eat in the way that people who are very focused sometimes do, not dramatically, just quietly leaving meals half-finished. Ren made dinner. This was not unusual. They had fallen into a comfortable rotation of sorts. Jiwoo cooked in the mornings, Ran in the evenings, a division that had emerged without discussion and simply existed now, like all the other small agreements that had assembled themselves into the texture of their shared life. But that evening Ran made Jiwoo's favorite. He had worked this out through observation and one indirect question disguised as a general one, and set it out properly and knocked on the study door at 7:30. "Food," he said. Jiwoo came out and they ate, and afterward Ren, who had not fully thought through what he was doing, sat down on the floor next to Jiwoo's desk with his own book and stayed. Not in the low chair in the corner, but actually on the floor, near enough that he was almost in Jiwoo's space, present in a way that was probably, he realized too late, a lot. Jiwoo didn't say anything. He went back to his drawings. The classical music played. Ren read 3 pages without taking any of them in. Around 10, Jiwoo reached over, without looking away from his work, and turned the desk lamp slightly so the light fell better over Ren's shoulder too. Ren stared at his book. Something in his chest went very quiet. He stayed until midnight and then said good night and went to his room and sat on the edge of his bed and thought, this is going to be a problem. Because he knew this feeling. He had had it before, this slow, mounting warmth toward someone that started in simple things, the particular angle of their attention, the shape of their habits, the way they made space for you without making an occasion of it. He had had it, and he had acted on it too quickly, and had always, eventually, made himself tiresome. He had a way of wanting things too vividly, of leaning in before the invitation was fully extended, of becoming, in the gentlest possible way, too much. 4 weeks left. He could manage 4 weeks. He was a grown man. He could simply exist in this apartment like a reasonable person and not attach meaning to desk lamps and open doors, and he would leave in 4 weeks, and that would be it. He was almost certain he could do this. The deadline passed. Jiwoo submitted his project on a Thursday evening and closed his laptop with the particular quiet satisfaction of someone who has finished something difficult, and came to find Ren in the kitchen where Ren was attempting, with limited success, to make a dessert from a recipe he had found in a magazine and did not have all the ingredients for. "What are you doing?" "Adapting," Ren said. Jiwoo looked at the counter. "You don't have the right flour for this." "I know." "It won't." "I know." A beat of silence, and then Jiwoo went to a low cabinet Ren had never opened and pulled out a different bag of flour entirely, and without further comment began adjusting the recipe from memory, moving around Ren in the small kitchen with an ease that seemed to have accumulated in them both without their fully noticing. They made the thing together. It was not entirely right, but it was edible, and they ate it at the kitchen table with the lights low and talked, easily, freely, the way they had been talking more often lately, about things that mattered and things that didn't, the loose, unhurried conversation of two people who had stopped performing and simply began being. Jiwoo told him about the library project, about the client, a retired schoolteacher who wanted the building to feel like a held breath, which was not technically a brief, but which Jiwoo had spent weeks trying to translate into structure. He talked about it with a precision that was also a kind of poetry, and Ren listened with his chin in his hand and felt that quiet internal warmth expand in his chest until it almost hurt. "You really love what you do," Ren said. Jiwoo looked at him, briefly taken off guard. "Yes. I don't know if I've ever had that." He hadn't meant to say that. It came out too real, too without decoration, the kind of honest admission he made sometimes at the wrong moment. He looked down at his plate. But Jiwoo said quietly, "You will." Not as comfort, not as performance. Just a calm statement of certainty that settled over Ren like something warm and external, borrowed from someone more sure. "You will." 2 words and nothing else. Ren held them a long time, the way you hold a stone warm from the sun. That night he didn't count the weeks. 2 weeks before his allotted time ended, Ren broke something. It was not a dramatic breaking, nothing irreplaceable, nothing meaningful to anyone but himself. He was carrying too many things from the bookshelf to the low table, and miscalculated the corner of the door frame, and a small ceramic piece fell from the pile in his arms and shattered on the floor of the hall. It had been on the bookshelf since he arrived, a small grey bowl with an irregular rim that he had never looked at closely enough to identify as significant until it was in pieces at his feet. Jiwoo came out of the study at the sound. Ren crouched immediately and began gathering the pieces, his hands moving fast and clumsy with the specific anxiety of someone who has long practice in the skill of quickly remedying their own mess. I'm sorry, I can get it fixed. There are people who, I'll pay for it." "Ren." "It came off the edge, I wasn't being careless, I just—" "Ren." He stopped, looked up. Jiwoo was crouching now too, across from him in the narrow hall, and his face was not what Ren had expected, not displeasure, not the quiet withdrawal that preceded the moment someone decided you were more trouble than you were worth. He was just looking at Ren, level and calm, the same way he looked at everything. "It was my grandmother's," Jiwoo said, and Ren's stomach dropped, "and it had a crack in it already. I kept it because I couldn't throw it away. That's all." He reached out and took the pieces gently from Ren's hands. His fingers were warm, careful. He set the pieces aside in a small pile. "Come," he said, and stood and went to the kitchen for the broom. Ren stayed crouched in the hall for a moment, his heart doing something stupid and unsteady. He pressed the back of his hand to his mouth for a second, just a second, and then stood up and followed. They swept the hall together in silence. When it was done, Jiwoo placed the shards carefully in a small cloth bag, not the trash, a cloth bag, and set it on the shelf where the bowl had been. "There's a method," he said, "where you repair broken things with gold. Kintsugi. The idea is that the break is part of the history." Ren looked at the cloth bag. "Are you going to do that?" "I don't know yet." They stood side by side in the kitchen, not quite touching, looking at the shelf. "I'm sorry," Ren said again, but differently this time. "Quieter." "I know," Jiwoo said. And then, "Stop apologizing for taking up space." It was the most direct thing he had said to him in almost 2 months. Ren turned to look at him and found Jiwoo already looking away, adjusting the glasses, the particular gesture that meant he was thinking something he was not going to say immediately. 13 days. The rain came in heavy on a Sunday, the kind that made the whole city grey and close, and they spent the day inside without discussion. Jiwoo worked in the morning and early afternoon. Ren read, and then started reading something else when the first book made him feel things he didn't want to follow, and then gave up on reading entirely and lay on the couch watching the rain against the window. Around 4, Jiwoo came out of the study and stood at the window for a while. Then he went to make tea. Then, instead of taking it back to his room, he came and sat in the armchair across from the couch where Ren was lying, and opened his own book. Ren watched him over the edge of his own. The light was dim and warm, and the rain was very loud on the glass. "Can I ask you something?" Ren said. "Yes." "Why do you live alone?" Jiwoo considered this without evident discomfort. "I lived with someone for a while. It ended. After that I got used to the quiet." "Does it feel—" Ren stopped. "Feel what?" "Lonely." A pause. Jiwoo turned a page he probably hadn't read. "Sometimes." The rain said everything else for a while. "It's been different," Jiwoo said then, still looking at his book. "Having you here." Ren's chest went very still. "Good, different, or—" "Good." One word. Flat and clear and without decoration, the way Jiwoo said the things that were most true. Ren understood by now that this was not coldness but precision. Jiwoo did not use extra words for things that didn't need them, which meant the words he did use meant exactly what they said. Ren looked at the ceiling. "Okay," he said. "Okay," Jiwoo said back. Neither of them spoke for a long time after that, and the quiet had a completely different texture than it had 8 weeks ago. 7 days. Ren found a place, a small apartment 2 stops away, affordable, with a window that faced a wall but had nice light in the mornings. He had been quietly looking for 3 weeks. It had taken this long to find something real. He told Jiwoo over breakfast on a Monday morning, pushing the information forward in the flat, practical manner he used for things he was actually worried about. "I found a place. I can move in on the 1st. Jiwoo looked at him. Something moved across his face very briefly and then composed itself again. "Good," he said. "That's good." He said it like the first time, like something that was fine. "Reasonable." Concluded. And Ren, who had been living for 2 months in a state of careful, disciplined restraint, felt something snap in him. Not loudly, not dramatically, just the way a held breath finally releases. The quiet rupture of something that has been held past its natural end. He finished his breakfast and went to his room and stood in the middle of it, looking at his bag in the corner that was still not fully unpacked, by design. He had kept it like that on purpose, a reminder that he was a guest, that this was temporary, that he did not belong here in any lasting sense. He sat on the bed. He thought about the lamp moved to cover his reading, the flower from the hidden cabinet, the open door. Stop apologizing for taking up space. It's been different, having you here. Good. He thought, I have been so careful. I have been so careful, and it has not made me want to leave any less. He thought, I don't think he wants me to leave either, and I don't know what to do with that. He lay down on the bed and looked at the ceiling, and the apartment was very quiet around him, and somewhere on the other side of the wall Jiwoo was at his desk, and Ren thought, 6 more days, and then I will go, and the spare room will empty out, and nothing will have happened here at all. The thought was intolerable. He noticed it was intolerable the same way you notice a window has been open, by the cold air already in the room, already everywhere. He found Jiwoo in the study that evening. The door was open. He stood in the doorway the way he had 100 times before, but this time he did not lean on the frame. He stood straight, his hands loose at his sides, and said, I want to tell you something, and I want you to know first that I'm not going to make it your problem. Jiwoo set down his pen. He turned in his chair and looked at Ran with full, unhurried attention. All right. I've been, Ren started, and then stopped, and the words sat there, already arriving before he sent them. He had always been bad at this, at not meaning things too much. I don't know when it started. I think it was slow. I think it was the desk lamp. Jiwoo was very still. And I know I've been careful, I have been careful, I know how I get, I know how I am about people, and I didn't want to do that to you because you've been so. He pressed his mouth closed for a moment. You've been good to me. And I don't want to make you uncomfortable, I don't want to make this into something it doesn't have to be, and I'm moving out in 6 days and that's fine. That's fine. But I thought, I needed to say it once, just once, so I could. He stopped again. Something in him was shaking, very lightly, the way a candle flame moves in a room that is not quite as still as it looks. I care about you. I care about you quite a lot, actually, and I know that might be too fast, and I know you have a life that is arranged, and that doesn't necessarily have. I'm not asking for anything. I'll behave. I just... He looked at Jiwoo in the lamplight and made himself finish it. Just don't send me away thinking you didn't know. The silence after was very long, or it felt very long. Ren counted his own heartbeats without meaning to. Jiwoo stood up from his chair. He moved to the doorway where Ren was standing, not past him, not around him, to him, and stopped close enough that Ren could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the slight unevenness of his breathing that suggested the stillness was deliberate, that it was, in fact, an effort. You'll behave, Jiwoo said, and it was not quite a question. I said I would. What does that mean for you? Ren searched his face. It means I won't push. I won't want things out loud. I'll be easy. Jiwoo was quiet for a moment. Then, I don't want you to be easy. Ren blinked. I've been living alone for 4 years, Jiwoo said, and I had this apartment exactly as I wanted it, and nothing was ever in the wrong place, and I was very comfortable. Okay. And you have been here for 8 weeks, and you leave things everywhere, and you knocked over half the bookshelf that one time, and you use up all the hot water on Tuesdays for some reason. I take long showers when I'm thinking, and the apartment has been entirely different, and I have not wanted, not once, for it to go back to the way it was before. The words landed in Ren's chest like light through glass, particular and warm and unexpectedly precise. He could not quite speak. Jiwoo reached up and straightened his glasses, which did not need straightening. "I looked at that spare room for 2 years before your sister called," he said. "I kept meaning to turn it into storage. I never did." "Jiwoo, you don't have to move out." Ren stared at him. "That's—" He stopped. "You're saying—" "I'm saying," Jiwoo said, very carefully, very clearly, "that I moved the lamp because I wanted you to be able to read. And I adjusted the shelf because I didn't want you to fall in the dark. And I left the door open because I wanted you to come in." A breath. "I'm not good at saying things directly. I do them instead. I thought perhaps you'd been understanding me." Rin laughed, suddenly, a short surprised sound that startled even him. "I was trying not to." "Why?" "Because I didn't want to be too much. I become too much." Jiwoo looked at him for a long moment. "You're not too much," he said. "You're the exact right amount for this apartment." Which was such an odd and precise and utterly Jiwoo thing to say that Ren felt the last of his careful restraint come apart entirely, quietly, like something put down after a long carry. He pressed his forehead briefly to his own arm against the door frame and breathed, and then straightened and found Jiwoo still there, still close, watching him with that dark, level gaze that was, Ren now understood, not distance but attention, the closest kind. "So what are you suggesting?" Ren said. "Exactly. That you call about the apartment tomorrow and cancel." "And then what?" "And then," Jiwoo said, "we figure out the next thing." It was the phrase his sister had used. The next thing. But in Jiwoo's mouth it meant something different. Not an unknown out there somewhere, but something here, between them, already assembling itself. Ren looked at him. "You're sure?" "I've been sure for a while," Jiwoo said. "I was waiting for you to say something." A pause. "You could have said something," Ren said. "I moved the lamp," Jiwoo said, with great dignity. Ren laughed again, and this time it opened something in his chest, warm and unheld and free, and he reached out, carefully, and touched Jiwoo's arm, just above the wrist, a question and an answer at once, and Jiwoo turned his hand and held it there. Neither of them moved for a long time. The rain had stopped, at some point. Ren had not noticed when. 3 months later, the spare room became a reading room. There was still a bed in it, for guests or for nights when one of them needed quiet, but it also had 2 low shelves and a good lamp and a chair that was an actual reading chair and not a storage chair, and on the windowsill there was a second plant, smaller than the one in the study, which Ren watered on Thursdays out of habit, and then on the other days too because he had no Jiwoo-like sense of botanical restraint and gave it more water than it probably needed. The ceramic bowl had been repaired. Jiwoo had done it himself, a small pot of gold lacquer and a lot of quiet patience, and the mended lines caught the light on the shelf, and the bowl was more itself now than it had been before, more present, more seen. Ren had asked, when it was done, "Why did you keep it when it was already cracked?" And Jiwoo had looked at it for a moment and said, "Because it was still itself. The crack didn't change that." Ren had thought about this for a long time afterward, in the particular way he thought about things Jiwoo said. Not immediately, but at 3 in the morning and over breakfast, and when he was washing dishes and the water was warm and the apartment was quiet around him. He still left things in the wrong place sometimes. He still used up all the hot water on Tuesdays. He still accumulated Jiwoo, his habits, his particular silences, the specific quality of his attention when he was working on something difficult, in the way he had always accumulated people he loved, not out of excess but out of the deep and ordinary need to know that they were there. And Jiwoo moved the lamp, and adjusted the shelves, and kept the door open, and said things plainly when they needed to be plain, and let the rest be said in other ways. One morning Ren woke before the alarm and lay still, listening to the sounds of the apartment, the tap running for 3 seconds, the drawer, the click of ceramic on counter. The sounds of someone who knew he was being listened to and was not bothered by it. not performing the domesticity of the morning, just being in it, and being close. Ren pulled the blanket up, the spare blanket now on the lower shelf, and looked at the ceiling and thought, I am the exact right amount for this apartment. The thought settled over him like something warm and earned, like a thing he had carried for a long time and finally set down in the right place. He got up to make breakfast.